Hey, are you searching for free information on resource guarding? Great, you're in the right place. I recently did a podcast with Ness Jones of Decoding Canine. She has tons of valuable information on her website, and I'm going to provide her link. In this video, you're going to learn the difference between a puppy who steals an item and runs around. Is that resource guarding, or is that just a pushy, confident rule setter trying to get you to do things that they want? Number two, you're going to learn that if you are engaging with the dog and they growl, should you be worried? Something that I thought about when I had my first few German Shepherds, like, okay, are we guarding here or are we play? But I'm going to explain it to you so you know the difference. Number three, I explain why dogs guard, and you might be surprised. It's really not about you. It's really much more about the dog. Number four, I share several tips on things that you should look for using a holistic approach if your dog is starting to show odd or unusual behavior. These are 4 things that you want to look at that might be able to fix that without actually needing behavior modification. Number 5, I'm going to share with you my behavior modification strategies using a positive approach on how to change a resource guarder's behavior. It keeps the relationship. You don't need to shock them because these dogs are already emotional, as you're going to learn in the video. And in my summary, you're going to learn that this big guy over my shoulder was a resource guarder or a rule setter. So enjoy. And if you like the video, please give it a like. It helps me out. Thanks.
Hello and welcome to Decoding Your Canine. Discover the secrets of having the perfect dog, the masterclass series covering health, training, well-being, and behavior. With me now is Judy Moore, and I'm excited because we are going to be talking about resource guarding, or is it resource guarding? What are we actually seeing? But first, Judy, welcome. Judy is from the Canine Behavior Counseling business, organization, whatever you want to call it. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm so interested in what you do because you're also a canine expert witness in the US court system. So that's pretty interesting. But just tell us about your journey into dog training and what you do now with it.
Yeah. Thanks for inviting me here. I'm very excited to share. Happy to be here with you, Ness. And I think it really started as a child in Cincinnati, Ohio. Grew up on a small horse farm, and my mother was president of the local humane society for 10 years. You can imagine that in 10 years, how many different dogs were brought to the house, the 3-legged ones, the blind ones. We had it all. That's where my passion was. And as a child, I remember living in the barn with the horses and the animals. That's just where I wanted to be. As I became an adult and started to rescue my own dogs, I realized that as an adult, I had 3 territorial dogs and really didn't know what to do. 2 of them had bitten people quite badly. And so I decided, as many dog trainers start their journey, learning from their own dog. 2008 or 2009, I remember going to the APDT conference and meeting, Pia Silvani and Patricia McConnell and Ian Dunbar. And my brain was just, whoa, with all this information. And I started canine behavior counseling as bite prevention because the 2 dogs that I currently had at that time were highly territorial. So I was learning everything I could to support them. I went on to join the IAABC, so I am a certified dog behavior consultant. Mm-hmm. And then in 2017, I started studying with Suzanne Clothier on her program called CARET. If anybody's thinking about doing CARET, I highly recommend it. Well, I graduated from that in 2019. And yes, I have served on the U.S. court a few times. It's always a bit emotional, but I do it for the dogs. And I currently have 2 German Shepherds right now who I'm just having a blast with.
Right. Yeah, cool. And you have worked with military veterans as well.
I did, yes. So I've made 14 matches here in the state of Maine with the nonprofit Pets for Vets. I traveled around and I was training trainers how to select the right social dog for the right person.
Right, yeah.
Even detailed, if the veteran wanted the dog right here, I want my dog in my bed with me or on the couch. That's a different use of space than some dogs who want to lay across the room and look at you. We really did very detailed trying to find the right dog for the right human. And that was a very, very rewarding.
Yeah. And you've also got a positive reinforcement online course, Bite Intervention for Everyone. That's so important. Yes.
It is important, yes. And so that has 2 parts to it. The first part is about introducing the worried dog to unfamiliar people. And the second part is that cooperative care, body handling, just reaching out and pausing and watching for the dog to look at the hand or lean away. It has some really, really good information there.
Yeah. And today we are talking about resource guarding, or as you say, is it rule setting, which is quite an interesting conversation. So talk us through that.
My goal for today is to help handlers, dog owners, dog trainers understand the difference between that emotional resource guarder and that confident rule setter, because they can look similar. But if you pay attention, there are differences. Many dogs like to steal forbidden things, as we were just talking about, stealing my glasses, as Jade likes to do, and chew on them. And dogs, sometimes they like to chew on them for consumption. They truly want to eat things. Some do it for attention. Some will grab the object and they want to play with you. They want to engage with the human. And I think sometimes they want to teach us how to play games. But there are some dogs who chew, they want to grab things because they like chewing on a particular fabric. It may be that they like leather or they like plastic. And so they have this kinesthetic awareness and they chew because it feels good to them. And then, of course, we have the resource guarder. And we know the resource guarder is going to grab the item and purposefully go somewhere and hide it. And that's, it makes me sad because the resource aggression falls under instrumental aggression. And I didn't come up with that term. Several other trainers have used it. And I think it fits because it means that it's a self-rewarding behavior. When we think about it, resource guarding is the dogs actually putting themselves in conflict, but to fulfill a need. They're getting a dopamine rush in their brain. Even though the aggression has a social cost with their handler, they're still choosing to do that. And I think that really changed a lot for me, how I looked at the resource guarder as a much more emotional dog. Daniel Shaw, he has, I believe it's abklearn.com, and he also has some programs that talk about aggression and resource guarding and what actually happens in the dog's brain and why these dogs are doing it as a self-rewarding behavior.
That's really interesting. So I spend a lot of time sitting in front of my computer, and the crazy young dog I showed you before,
Yes.
she'll often go and do something she shouldn't, but I kind of set her up though. So I give her, there's a piece of ribbon I can keep hanging out of the cupboard.
Yes.
And she thinks she's not allowed to have it, but I actually set her up to go and take it. And
Yes. Yeah.
just to, so she's getting that dopamine hit. But
there you go.
I can trust her with it. I'm not worried that something's going to go wrong with something. So I guess what you're saying is temperament does play a role in understanding resource guarding or rule setting then.
It absolutely does. I'm confident of this. And what I think we need to realize is most of these dogs have low sociability with people. It means they're either unsure with people, they're worried about people, they're intimidated by people, but they don't really understand human body language. And they take offense to us very easily, even though they do. They take offense. We walk at them and they're like, whoa, that's rude.
Yeah.
And so they're not tolerant with touching, right? So there's some of these dogs you reach out and they're like, hey, I'm standing in front of you. It doesn't mean that you can touch me, but they're just not very tolerant of tactile touching. I think the other piece that we see in these dogs is their emotional state is all over the place. They're just not a well-balanced animal. They can shift from passive, hesitant, avoidant to becoming incredibly activated. Those combinations, the low sociability, the low tolerance for touching, the emotional arousal state, and then they've got the social confidence, which says, I don't like you, but I'm going to tell you back off. And that can be it can be a tough temperament. When I see that right away in a dog, I immediately think, I wonder if this puppy's going to guard resources. And I'll often put that in my puppy assessment test to help the people understand.
Hang on.
If I'm doing a litter of puppies, I want the handler to understand that this puppy is going to need some special support in certain settings. And I remember years ago watching Bob Bailey and Gene Donaldson having this conversation back in, I think, 2010. And I don't know which one of them said, but it said, if you take a puppy with some low sociability and you put it in the right hands, it can grow and do well. But put that puppy in the wrong hands and you're going to have problems in the adolescence.
What would you say is the difference, between resource guarding and rule setting? If for somebody that doesn't understand, what are they looking at that they can
Absolutely.
say, well,
yeah. What I like to tell people about the rule setter is that social dog. They sail through life with a tall head, tail up, nice flat back, nice straight legs. They sort of just walk with this self-assured, I got this. And you can just see those dogs that navigate different settings. And some of them are friendly. They approach people. Some of them are tolerant. Some of them are territorial. But what we always know about that rule setter is they're thoughtful and they're purposeful. And you can almost never see a rule setter that's going to compress and get all worried and change shape. you might offend them and they might think you're stupid, but they're not going to compress and get all emotional. One thing a rule setter is they are not reactive. They're not reactive, they're self-assured, and they're very thoughtful. I think when we're engaging with a rule setter, it may bark at you and then it may drop a toy and say, well, maybe I can get this person to be useful for me. Or they may turn around and try and get that person to scratch their butt. They can get their message across the room from to a human or to a dog with very minimal effort. And it means that they might lift their head up and make eye contact from 10, 12 feet across the room. And they might just do a hard-eyed stare or a little lip lift, but it's all very emotionally controlled. But they get their message across without a lot of effort. And so those are what I call the rule setters. You've got the rule setter, you've got the emotional dog. Somewhere here in the middle, you've got this highly social dog. And I really am wondering if a lot of the population understands what a highly social dog looks like. The ideal behavior of a highly social dog is that dog who approaches unfamiliar people with a nice, smooth, self-assured pace, nice wiggle in the back, very relaxed joints, very relaxed foot placement. It's got that soft blinking eye. And the dog often will approach somebody, they'll lean in, they make gentle physical contact. The tail is neutral. And what I want to say about that sociability is when it leans into the person and the person actually makes physical contact, the dog's arousal doesn't shift. They're well balanced. They're like, hey, what's up? You pet them and they don't have to do that C curve around your arm. They don't escalate in over the top excitement. They're just really a well balanced animal that says, yeah, you're cool. I like being with you. I could go off and smell, or I could go off and play with that dog over there, but I'm interested in engaging with you. And I think it's rare to find that really calm, thoughtful, relaxed social dog. And in contrast to that, you've got the emotional dog greeting. And this one people are going to know really well, because for the emotional dog, which I would say, okay, could this dog be a resource guarder, is you've got the dog who comes flying in the room and all of a sudden sees you there, whoa, 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 that bark, like, hey, who are you? I don't think you're supposed to be here. They show their displeasure, a little bit of confidence for me, barking, backing away, barking. And that dog's already saying, I'm not crazy that you're in my house. The other type of dog is the one that we know that comes in and maybe jumps on you and is just, the whole body is just over the top, wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. Lots of appeasement, lots of lipping. And we know that as trainers, people say, no, my dog's highly social because he greets everybody. But when you look at that greeting and you look at all that wiggle, that's an emotional change. Those are often appeasement behaviors, right? And that dog, anytime the dog gets compressed or changes shape, we know that that's changing an emotion. And we have to think about that for these dogs that greet us. The one that I think is funny with the pattern is the dog that rushes in, and I don't know why I think of it as labs, but they come in and they body slam you, kind of physical, and then they sort of chaotically run around in a little circle and come back in, but then they have to disconnect and they run in a circle and come back.
Definitely labs.
It definitely labs, right? And so it's the emotion is just all over the place. And so it's not just about excitement, though. It really is about an unsure state of arousal. I think their physiological system is all over the place. And the ones that make me personally the most nervous are the ones that strut up to me, very thoughtful, closed mouth, tail up over their back, come strutting in, smell me all over, close their mouth and stare in my eye.
Ooh.
Low sociability, or pretty sometimes void of sociability, but yet socially confident. And those I'm pretty sure that I'm like, okay, if your dog started guarding resources, because if it hasn't, it's probably going to. It's that motionless that gets you, kind of gets you thinking about it. And I think in that motionless, you've got the social dog makes good eye contact, but it's soft blinking eye contact. The resource guarder, they're going to stare at you and say, why are you here? Yeah. And they're really not going to be blinking. And if they stay frontal, please, people, don't reach your hands out to a dog that approaches you and stays frontal. If he wants to make physical contact, he will nudge your hand. But I think people should not reach out for these dogs who approach motionless and have their mouth closed and stare at them. And so those are the ones that I'm like, okay, we need to test this rescue dog for resource guarding. Yeah,
that mouth closed thing and the hard stares. Yeah, and if you don't know, you don't know. But I'd like to really talk about if someone's not sure if their dog is a resource guarder. I mean, what are some examples of what dogs do guard. I mean, because maybe they've got a little lap dog, they put it on their lap and it won't let their husband near them or something, but they might not recognize that is the dog guarding them or resource guarding them.
Right. So dogs can definitely guard space. They can guard people. They can guard you from other dogs. I've actually had a dog that guarded the bathroom.
Oh, really?
Really understood, guarded the doorway to the bathroom.
Oh my God.
A little wire-haired terrier years ago. She also guarded the refrigerator, and I felt bad, and I would do things differently today, but I said, no, are you serious? She's a cute little thing. And I was working with her cooperative, click and treat, and she was doing fine. And I opened the refrigerator, and she latched onto the bottom drawer and would not let go.
Oh,
and it was not funny anymore. It was not funny. When I tried to close the door, she came at me, and I had to jump on a stool. So I would do things completely differently. She was only about 30 pounds, but boy, was she feisty. And so she guarded the refrigerator. And I've heard the term digital guarding, where if you teach a dog that they're not going to guard in a certain area, or you fix this area. See, when I approach here, good things happen. Some of these dogs enjoy the rush so much that they'll start to guard couches and chairs and refrigerators. When the animal steals something and runs, I think it's really hard to tell, right? So
is it play or is it something else? Yeah.
And I think the telling tale, if your dog is grabbing something and you've got this adolescent between 5 months and 15 months, and the dog starts to run around, for me, the rule setter is going to grab something. It's going to look more playful. It's going to look more bouncy. And oftentimes those dogs stay near you because they want to engage. They often don't run away. And so they'll run around you. Their body has got some flexion in it. They may go to a certain area in your space, and you go up to get the item, but they're not going to be doing that hard-eyed stare. They might put their paw on it, but they're often looking down, but you can see a little bit of flexion in their body. You can see a blink in their eye. And I think for some of these rule setters that are trying to teach us, I think they're trying to teach us how to play tug. I think they're trying to engage with us. And that's one of the differences. That dog will stay in your proximity and try to engage with you. And I tell clients, because it makes me sad when they say, no, we can't play tug, he growled. And I said, well, did he growl with movement? And in many cases, when you go to pull the object and they pull it back and you pull and they do start to growl. But if there's movement and it feels playful, I think many of these rule setters are really stealing things to try and get their humans to play with them. I mean, playing tug could be the best part of their day.
Yeah.
Right.
And so that Rottweiler on the wall behind me, he's a Rottweiler. Yes. Rottweilers like to possess, it's part of their genetic makeup. So as a reward for him for maybe doing an exercise, he got to possess the tug or the toy or what have you. But it was all, if you did go and take it off him, he would be like, but it was based in play. Like you say, it wasn't based in, maybe a part of him right back in his little genetic brain was going, no, this is mine, it's mine. But it really, he wanted to play and keep the game going and all that sort of stuff.
I mean, you taught him that it was fun to engage with too. I always say that to the dogs that I'm working with, it's way more fun to engage with too. But that has a very different feel, right? Than the resource guarder who grabs something and is very different. They're not going to hang around. They're very purposeful. They often, their adrenaline starts to come in and you can see them sort of march. Their body just seems to become very stiff as they head towards a specific place. It's often they want to go under something. They want to go behind something. It's a very different feel because they are heading to somewhere because they've got a purpose and it's not right under your feet. And for those dogs, I tell people to be cautious when you approach, because that dog often, if it does not feel like play, it's very still. They do often make direct eye contact with you. And some of these dogs can escalate really quickly. And so you have to really go slow and say, okay, I don't want you to bite me. But I think a lot of owners are like, why is my dog threatening to bite me? I take care of them. I do all these things. And so that's when I try to explain that, well, he's emotional. He's trying to fill his own need. He's getting this dopamine rush. And so it feels really good to do it. And so the question is, why is this dog living in this sympathetic nervous system? And why is he trying to actually steal things to get his own reinforcement? I think that's part of the puzzle to figure out, because I think these dogs really need support.
Yeah, it's really interesting. How much do you think genetics play a role? So I mentioned Rottweilers like to possess. That doesn't mean all Rottweilers are resource guarders. They could be rule setters as well, but or they might not be either. But like, are there certain breeds that are more predisposed? Would you say?
I don't know that there's more breeds. I mean, I do think there are the livestock guarding dogs who may have that in their genetic makeup, but I do think it's both. I think it's the genetics, and I think it's the environment that they're trained in.
Yeah.
Because we know that when we catch them early on, we can counter condition that behavior really, really well. There's a high probability the earlier you catch them that we can help the dog understand that, hey, when you don't guard, good things happen.
Well, you are going to give people a few tips about what to do if they've got a dog that resource guards, but I really want to ask you something before we go down this road, and it's kind of like the elephant in the room, in a sense that there's this school of thought that says, right, you've got this dog, maybe a puppy or what have you, and when you're feeding them, you want to prevent resource guarding, so you should chuck your hand in the food and take it away from them and put it back and take it away from them, put it back. All that, you're shaking your head because I know you're going to say what I feel as well. Don't do it.
No, I think it's a bunch of nonsense. I think a much better process is to hand feed the dog and pet them lovingly and share. It's like we have a cooperative approach here. If I'm eating my sandwich, my dog comes up, okay, well, can you sit and I will share with you? I really think using a much more cooperative approach. I actually think that when you take the food bowl away and the dog starts chowing faster, which of course they want to do, and then people say, oh, you can't do that. I think that actually makes an animal worse often.
I agree. I feel like if you didn't have a problem, you could actually create one doing that. Yeah,
absolutely. I believe you can create a guarder. When you've got a dog with that low sociability, but that's super confident, and you've got somebody maybe who's never had a dog before that's incredibly passive and sets no rules, that can be a recipe for a resource guarder. You can absolutely cultivate that.
Yeah. So what are some tips for people that have got a resource guarder?
Yeah, I think with all behavior modification, we really have to think about the health of the dog. So we do need to acquire that medical history to rule out thyroid disease, Lyme disease, Cushing's. We really need to make sure there's no physical pain, because sometimes dogs, when they're in physical pain, can be less tolerant. I want to know what that bite history is. Ian Dunbar's bite scale, how many bites, how bad were they? I talk a lot about nutrition. I don't know what it is in our market nowadays, but so much of the kibble I'm seeing, just last week, somebody showed me a bag, it was 14% protein. And I said, so then I would ask you to eat your bagel and maybe your hamburger bun with a little bit of cheese on it for the week and see how hungry you are. So I don't understand this high carb, low protein diet now. But we want to decide if there are any gut issues. We want to talk about sleeping patterns and exercise routine. Is the dog getting exercise? And I want to know, does the dog have anything that he has control over during the day, or is he frustrated? You walk him on a 4-foot leash, maybe 20 minutes a day, and is he frustrated? But I think when we get into training, the first thing that I think about is the relationship. When I hear resource guarding, the first thing I'm going to go to is I'm going to talk to the human about what is the relationship between you and your dog? What is the connection? What is your parenting style? And so I encourage and talk about a cooperative parenting style, depending on what they're using. I think that we have to give the dog some skills. So I'm going to encourage purposeful socialization. And I tell people, if you've got a dog that's afraid of one person, that doesn't mean you can take them into a social setting. We're not going to take him to the farmer's market or to places where there's a lot of people if he's worried about one. It really needs to be one person. So we talk about purposeful socialization without petting often. And then I do want to spend some time on cooperative care, because these dogs have low tolerance for touching. It's just part of their makeup. They really don't enjoy a lot of touching from unfamiliar people. Of course, we have management to prevent bites. But if I have a client call me or email me and they're desperate, and I get those every week, people are in tears, I will start out with them. I'll just send them, look, try and do these 5 quick guarding games. And I'd say your goal is to change how the dog feels with you, food, or an object, and the dog. Change how the animal feels with you nearby. And so these 5 games are super simple. Anybody can try them starting today. you can take your dog out into a neutral environment. It's usually the backyard, the neighbor's yard. You can go down to the local park. And with the dog on a leash, we want to put out objects. It might be a snuffle mat, might be a paper plate, might be a bowl, might be a hat, might be a couple boxes. And if the dog is not used to this type of setup, doesn't matter if it's a straight line or a circle, the dog's going to run around on a leash. You're letting them sniff. It's just free choice. And the dog gets to trot around and smell things. Then as he's more purposeful, more in his thinking brain, when he sniffs something, you're just going to drop a couple treats on that object. Drop a couple treats right in the box, in the snuffle mat. The dog doesn't have to do anything. We're just creating this feeling of you, me, and food, and it's all good. And we always start in a neutral environment, not in your kitchen. And so then we go to adding value. Step 2 is adding value. And then step 3 is after the dog starts to go around, he smells something, there's nothing there. The dog looks up at you. You're like, yes. You can click if you want to for eye contact, but yes. And then you can add some value. We don't add enough value that the dog wants to guard it, but it's a couple pieces that say, yeah, you looked at me, I'm going to add things. And you've got the hand going down and dropping things into that box or something that the dog is not going to guard. We don't want to start with the dog's food bowl.
No.
And if that goes well, then I let them go to where they're picking up the novel object. So you go up to a cardboard box, and if the dog's not guarding cardboard boxes, a nice small little UPS box, you're going, oh, look, there's nothing in here, but look, I can put stuff in here and then I'm going to sit it back down. So it's an idea of picking something up, adding food to it, and putting it back down. It's just adding some physical contact. And so you can go around, you can pick up boxes, you can pick up a hat, whatever it is, drop some food on it, and then add it back down. So now we're adding a little bit of movement. And I like to start with those games before I have somebody just approach, because I feel like if I tether the dog and have somebody approach, it's going to slide a little bit back into that old habit. But on a leash, out in the park, they're not going to be thinking about that. And then we usually end with play. I'm a big fan of playing tug. I mean, I know there are some dogs that don't like to play tug, but playing tug gives you a really nice way of teaching the dog a drop it, right? Let the dog win. You know, you say drop it, chuck the cookie, and then you can pull out another toy. And what I would ask people to do, and you probably do this, Ness, but when people are done playing tug, I think it's only fair that they don't say, drop it, and then put the toy in their pocket and march off. And the dog's like, wait,
yeah,
I
I'm
dropped
giving it back to you next time.
I'm never going to give it back to you. So try to add a different word. So when I'm finished, I let the dogs win and I say, okay, we're all done. And I let them either carry it or leave it. And then we head off the field. But I think you got to be fair to these dogs, because when you're not fair, I mean, they look at us like we're stupid sometimes.
Yeah, no, that's so true. If you I let my dogs carry their toys back to the car or whatever it is. Yeah, so
I do too.
Usually by the time I get to the car, they're like, oh, okay, I want to drink of water now or whatever it is. So they're not too bothered about the toy anymore. They know the game is finished. So yeah.
Good. Yeah, and that's fair.
Yeah. So what about the people that and this happens a lot, I guess. I'm sure you've had 1,000 clients like this where, maybe it's a little lap dog that's on mum's lap and hubby wants to, talk to her, give her a kiss, sit next to her, whatever it is.
Yes.
I mean, what are we going to do about those dogs?
So that to me is a relationship. That tells me that dog's bonded with that one person and isn't interested in having that relationship with anyone else. So I like to tell my clients that, well, you have to add value to the dog. You either have to be add value and when you approach to sit down by your wife, you're either adding food to the dog, you're bringing a nice toy or a Kong. The dog wants to know if you can add purposeful value to the dog's life. So I will have that person in a different environment. I always try and start it in a different setting. So we usually take them out on the front porch. And I will have dad approach and often give the dog a cookie. And I have them say the name as they approach, show it to them. Here's the cookie, and then turn and walk away. We might do 3 repetitions of that. Then dad will approach, sit down, then feed the cookie. Then we do that a few times. If that goes well, then he's going to sit down, put his arm around mom, then give the dog a cookie, but adding value. If the dog does growl and get snippy, I want to know how much does the dog. If the dog just gives a low growl, oftentimes I will keep the training. I'll say, just keep doing the training and ignore the growl. And oftentimes the growl just goes away. And so I think it depends on the dog. But I really tell people, I said, well, you're not adding value to the dog when you approach and sit. You need to add value. These dogs are smart, and so they don't want to lose their human. But if you can teach them that when we're all together, we have a party. Mom's had the treats sitting over there, but she doesn't open them until dad comes in and sits down. Come on, dad, I need you to come sit down.
Yeah. And I mean, dogs are very much of the mindset, what's in it for me? So
right.
At the moment when they're resource guarding mum's lap, there's nothing in it for I'm getting all the attention. I don't want you over here. But
right.
if dad's coming over with something valuable, then yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, they're not stupid, are they?
No, they're not. So anything else that you think is important for people to know and understand?
I think really I want people to avoid getting bit. I mean, it's really, really hurtful. I mean, physically it hurts and mentally it hurts when you have your own dog bite you. But I would ask people, when their dog steals something or they're guarding something, look at the dog's overall body language. Does it look playful or does it look purposeful? And I think if more people could look at the dog and get a better idea that, okay, this dog is serious. It stole something, went directly to that place. It's hunkered down and the object is way in the back of the jaw. That's also a good indicator. Don't fight with the dog. Call a professional. We have to create a different relationship between that dog and the human. I purposely would ask those people to not send their dog off to boot camp. I know a lot of resource guarders, they get shipped away to boot camp to be corrected, and that's really not what they need. They're trying to seek out their own reward. These are emotional dogs that are doing this oftentimes. So if you're afraid of your dog, you should reach out to a certified behavior consultant, right? Or a behaviorist, a certified behaviorist, and get some help.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you take a holistic approach too. So you're not just looking at the dog's behavior, emotional state, you're also looking at the diet and physical pain and, the exercise regimen, probably enrichment, everything makes some impact on that dog. Yeah.
It all matters.
Just actually, before we wrap up, you must see a lot of dogs that have come to you that have been possibly to other trainers that use the flooding technique where they're forcing that attention on the dog that doesn't want it to the point where they just go, they might not be the barking, growling, lunging dogs. They might be the shut down ones, perhaps.
Yes. And if I get a dog that's been sent to boot camp or that's had the shock collar training, those are the most difficult ones for the dog to come back. And I will elicit a low-level distance cue. I will put the dog behind a barrier or on a tether. And if I walk through and the dog gives a low growl, I'm going to walk away. I'm going to let the dog know that, you know what, you can growl all your life. This guy back here growled at thousands of people, but he didn't have to bite.
Yeah.
He didn't have to bite. And so we try to actually tell the clients, it's okay if your dog growls. We don't want him to lunge. So if he can learn to growl and that works, that is a low-level distance cue. And so there are some setups that I like to do to encourage dogs to use that low level. And I want them to know the low-level cue works. You don't need to lunge and bite me. I will respond to just a growl. Mm-hmm. I can remember years ago, clicker training Pablo when he would growl at people. And I had some trainers tell me, you're crazy for rewarding that behavior. And I said, I don't think so. I really don't think so. He was in my car once, had his head out the window, and a man got out next to me. He said, oh, can I pet your dog? I said, well, you can ask him. And Pablo had his head on the car window, and the guy says, hey, buddy. And he had his hand about 10 inches away, and Pablo just went and just showed his teeth. The guy said, I don't think so. I said, no. And I winked at Pablo. I was like, good dog. And he just stayed there. So he was very thoughtful about it, but he didn't ever get stressed when people approached because I didn't correct it.
Yeah, and it's so interesting, isn't it? Because a lot of trainers would say, well, actually, no, we don't want that growling. You've just rewarded that dog for growling at that person. In fact, flip it on its head and look at it from the dog's point of view. Exactly.
Yeah. It's worked. And I feel bad for those dogs you're talking about that are shut down, that have tried to express. They don't want strangers touching them. And why? I don't want strangers coming up and hugging me.
Oh. So give them some autonomy. Judy, what a great conversation. Thank you so much for joining me today. I've really enjoyed it.
Good. Thank you for having me.
To see more videos explaining dog behavior, be sure and subscribe to my channel.